Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Wednesday night, January the 12th. I'm happy to be here. Child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. It's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I have the link into the chat room there that I want to talk about tonight, and we are going to continue looking at this particular website that we were looking at Monday night, dealing with family violence and the violent family. And on Monday night, we were kind of just going over some of the statistics and whatnot that were on that website. It's a great website. I hope everybody will check it out. There's all kinds of links and different information on there. I just sort of happened to stumble across it just looking for information to dealing with domestic violence, family violence, and whatnot, right? So I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. Thanks very much. I had to bump my shows up an hour. That's because we bumped up Dreamcatchers Talk Radio an hour, and I do Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio. That is www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. And if you're interested in catching me over there, I'm on Monday through Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, and 9 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, and 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So that's why I had to bump my shows on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, because Dreamcatchers got bumped up an hour. And hopefully it's a better time slot. I'm really hoping that it will, more people will be able to get in on the show just because of the time change. So hopefully that's the case. So if you're interested in listening to me over there, you're more than welcome to tune in over there as well. We do, we're always looking for, as many people as we can to get involved, right, to help stop child abuse, right? So I'm not a therapist or a counselor. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and I say this on every show just in case it's somebody who's listening for the first time. And I'm covering the topics of abuse, which are very sensitive, so, you have to know what's good for you to listen to and listen at your own discretion, right? I talk a lot about my own personal stuff on this show, and that's why I always put out a discretionary note for everybody to listen at their own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, and that's because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I think that children have the right to be protected at all times. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I just got off the show there. I just immediately just finished the show there, and now I'm on this show. So, yeah, forgive me if I'm talking a little fast here. I'm just trying to catch my breath, really. It's great to be able to do these shows, and I just, really even just to get out the information to children that you have to protect yourself online. You need to be very careful what you're doing, and when there's a chat room present, you need to know how to keep yourself safe in a chat room. If you don't know that information or you don't know how to get that information, you can contact me here, but mainly just type into your browser internet safety, online safety for children, things like this. That will bring you to websites that will teach you how to be safe online, right? So if you're under the age of 18, have permission to listen to my show. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. So we're going to get right into this topic here, and this is causes and effects, and I'll give you the whole title here and where it's from. Causes and Effects of Child Abuse, the Violent Family. This is from www.libraryindex.com, and I happened to just run across this not too long ago and saw that there was information on here regarding, it's a library index website, so www.libraryindex.com. There's information on here of social issues and debate topics, causes and effects of child abuse, some contributing factors to child abuse, the violent family, abusive mothers, abusive fathers, and abusive siblings. And that's why I want to look at this. And we're going to be looking at this tonight, Friday night, as well as next week probably. We'll see how long it takes us to get through this info. But I really want to check this out because it sort of deals with all the different dynamics of a violent family. And that's what I grew up in. So, that's why I want to look at this and actually kind of get into what they're talking about here. On Monday night, we were talking about this website here, spousal conflicts. We read through some of this. Spousal conflicts, spousal verbal aggression with child abuse, right? And there was all kinds of stats. They were saying that the percentage of child abuse, the rates were so much higher when there was verbal abuse as well as physical abuse. It just seems like, the more aggressive, the more violent, obviously the more abuse. And the numbers actually show it. So if you go to this website, you can see that they've actually done the research and the studies and pulled up the research for it. And there's some great information from the National Family Violence Survey, as well as there's another resource that they used that they're talking about quite a bit, which is Family Patterns in Child Abuse from Physical Violence in American Families, Risk Factors and Adaptations to Violence in 8,145 Families. And it was some research that Murray A. Strauss and Christine Smith actually, I guess, put that particular information out, right, after doing studies. So it's really quite harsh to see what happens in family dynamics when there is verbal aggression on top of physical abuse. It's actually just that much worse. And so I know growing up in that's what I was talking about Monday night. If you want to go back and catch my show, just really discussing the fact that it was horrible to be involved in that and be a part of being abused like that by your parents, both verbally and physically. It's harsh on children. It's absolutely horrific. They said that, because here they said verbal abuse of children. Parents who verbally abuse their children are also more likely to physically abuse their children. Respondents to the 1975 National Family Violence Survey who verbally abused their children reported a child abuse rate 6 times that of other parents. So people who verbally abuse their children 6 times higher physically than those who don't verbally abuse their children, right? Kind of just goes hand in hand, right? Very sad, and I know I grew up like that. Very sad, absolutely horrific. Then they talk about spousal physical aggression and child abuse, and they also talk about, we sort of left off there, psychological abuse, family dynamics. And I think we kind of even went over a little bit of this, but Marie-Hélène Gagne and Camille Bouchard sought to determine the family characteristics that predispose parents to psychologically abuse their children. And this is the family dynamics associated with the use of psychology or psychologically violent parental practices. That's from the Journal of Family Violence, Volume 19, Number 2, April 2004. Based on interviews with parents experiencing difficulties in their relationships with their children, parents with no apparent or acknowledged difficulties, and practitioners, the researchers gathered examples of psychological violence from parents who had experienced it and from practitioners who had come in contact with different family situations. So they kind of took a look at these different, research groups, right? And they said the researchers identified 4 family characteristics that are likely to result in parental psychological violence. And the first involves a scapegoat child who may be different from other family members by his or her unattractiveness, slow mental abilities, or disability. The scapegoat may be an unwanted child, the child of a former spouse, or an adopted child. And this child is typically neglected by the parents who favor his siblings. His or her siblings, right? He is treated harshly, he or she, and excluded from family intimacies. So that's one. That's the scapegoat. That's an issue for children being abused. It's kind of like, like they're saying here, maybe there's something about the child, like they have a learning disability or some type of disability, or they're a child from another spouse, a former spouse, or they're adopted, or they're unwanted, right? Then they'll be treated differently. They won't be part of the family, so they're the scapegoat, kind of like the black sheep of the family type thing. The second type of family has a domineering father who intimidates the children and may even turn physically violent. The harsh treatment of the children is in reality a cover-up for his poor self-image and feelings of incompetence, and that was my dad. So I was a scapegoat. My dad was the second type of family as a domineering father. My dad was like that because he was mentally ill. He still is. Well, he had surgery today, so I don't know. Hopefully he's still here, but if not, then he's gone on to be with the Lord. But I haven't heard how his surgery went. But he had actually he had a stroke, and he is not doing all that well. He's 88 years old, but my prayers are with him for sure. But my dad, he had such a poor self-image and feelings of incompetence that he thought he had to be this manly man, and that's why he abused my brothers, and that's why my parents were brought up on child abuse charges, right? Because my dad had this poor self-image and thought that he had to be this tough, kind of, I'll show you, kicking the crap out of my brothers, and of course got busted for it, right? Both my parents were busted for child abuse. So it's absolutely horrific and harsh what happens to children. So the harsh treatment of the children is in reality a cover-up, right, for his poor self-image and feelings of incompetence. The mother, assuming the role of peacekeeper, suffers stress and fatigue. In extreme cases, she herself may be a victim of spousal violence, and the children may be psychologically abused by both parents, and that was our case, right? Both my parents were psychologically ill. They both had mental problems. They were both abused as children. I talk about this like on almost every show, but I really want people to realize that children growing up in that situation don't really have a chance, and if they make it, it's a miracle. Even if their parents don't kill them and put them in body bags, they'll go on to suffer really sad, pathetic adult lives until they realize, hey, I can get help. right? It's like, yeah, it's if you were brought up in a family where there was no help, there was no hope, and there wasn't any idea that a person could have a good life, you know what I mean? So many people actually are brought up like that. It's very sad. So many children, and then they grow up to be adults, and if they don't realize and snap that really it is up to them as an adult, even though they were abused as children. This is why I talk about this on One Child Abuse Survivor to Another in the mornings. If you guys want to catch my shows, and if you haven't caught them, that's really what I focus on, is the fact that as adults, adult survivors of child abuse, it is really ultimately up to us to get the help that we need. And if we're suffering and we're not doing well, we're not coping well, we're self-sabotaging, we are re-victimizing, basically setting ourselves up for re-victimization, and our lives are just not going well, ultimately as an adult, it is our responsibility to change that. And we can't just, I couldn't sit there and say, well, my adult life now is not my responsibility, because it is. And so, I have to do the right thing by myself. And so many times people who have been abused don't know how to take care of themselves. And that's why I do those shows in the morning, because I really want to bring out to people that I know myself, personally, so many people who were abused as children, who were not taught how to take care of themselves. They were not shown how to cope in this world, how to live, how to even live, you know what I mean? And that's an extreme case, but my case is extreme, you know what I mean? But that it was extremely hard to live. It would have been easier just to die. And so that's why our whole family really was on the road to death, because everybody in my family, we all grew up under my parents, and my parents were very much into suicidal tendencies, suicidal talking, suicidal thoughts, threats of suicide, threats of killing the family, threats of killing some of the children, threats of killing, me. Our lives were being threatened verbally and even physically on a regular basis growing up. So it was hard to live, right? It would have been so much easier just to give up. But that's why, 4 years ago, I said, man, I am so glad that I did not give up, because, I can see the other side now. Whereas before, I was looking at it from a victim's point of view, and didn't even realize that it was ultimately up to me to heal, right? Because I had never taken the steps to do it, and it's not that I hadn't accepted the abuse. I lived with it all my life, and I knew what had happened to me, and I knew what had happened to my family. So it's not like I was in denial. But my big thing was that I was always sitting around thinking, how am I going to get out of this pain? How am I going to get out of this pain? I'll never be able to get out of this pain until I'm gone from this earth, right? That's what kept running through my mind. And I didn't realize that I was going to have to be the one to get myself out of the pain. I was hoping somebody else would do it for me. I kind of thought a friend or somebody in my life would take away the pain, And I didn't realize, until the age of 41, that it was going to have to be me to do that. And so that's why I talk about all that in the morning there, if you ever want to catch those shows. But it's incredibly harsh on children, and it's so bad what people do to their children. And then the children grow up and have to pick up the pieces. And if they're not killed and put into body bags, like I said. The authoritarian mother typifies the third family characteristic leading to parental psychological abuse. She controls the household, and her spouse is powerless to defend the children. The children are expected to do as she bids, despite the facade of control. This mother fears for her children. She overprotects them to the point of standing in the way of their independence. In turn, she demands full submission, so that the child who opposes her suffers psychological abuse. And that's, my mom was kind of like that, but a little bit more abusive. She was abused herself, and she was in this abusive marriage, but she also wanted to take control, so she took control of whoever she could, which was me, my sister, and a couple of my brothers, who she still could overpower, right? Anybody my mom could physically overpower is who she took control of. And so that was the younger siblings, me, my sister, who was 5 years older, my brother, who was 2 years older than my sister, so 7 years older than me, and my other brother, who was 3 years older, so he was 10 years older than me. So, actually, no, he was 13 years older than me. That's right. So, anybody she could still take on, because my mother was a pretty powerful woman, and, that's the whole issue. Both my parents were very strong, and they used to attempt to kill each other, quite a bit. They were very violent, vicious people. My mom was 5'10", and weighed about 280 pounds at any given time. My dad was over 6 feet and weighed, probably around least 220. But my mom was quite a bit heavier than my dad, but my dad could still overpower her. He was a pretty strong man, but that's why my mom would pull out, pots and pans, whatever she could get a hold of, that she would bash him with it, try to get him to stay away from her. Of course, because he was abusing her, so that's the whole issue. She basically was just trying to defend herself. But with me, a 280-pound, 5'10" woman beating on a small, 8-year-old girl. I mean, my God, you know what I mean? It wasn't a pretty sight. And so she was very abusive, very controlling. She had no control over. She felt pretty powerless. She felt like she didn't have any control, so she pushed her weight around with me. And that's where my bad attitude comes in, right? Because I'm a little bit grumpy because none of the siblings stuck up for me, but it's because they didn't want to get beaten either. Like none of the siblings, my siblings that were in the home that witnessed the abuse, would never come to my aid. Well, one of my brothers did one time, and but my sister would never, because she didn't want to get beaten up, right? I know that's why she did that. So she would sit and pretend it wasn't happening so that she wouldn't get a beating too, right? Because she certainly didn't want to get what I was getting, right? So, it's kind of sad that, my mom had that kind of control, but she sure did. And, both of our parents were both extremely abusive people, right? So, but my parents, they didn't overprotect us. They really didn't care what we were doing, and didn't care how we were, right? So it wasn't that. She wasn't doing that. She wasn't like overprotecting. She was just demanding that everyone that she could manipulate would be submissive. So I mean, if I had a look on my face that wasn't right, if I came into the room and a look on my face wasn't exactly what she wanted to see, then I could suffer a beating. I could be screamed at, yelled at, hollered at, thrown out of the house, just for having a look on my face. Right, that's how abusive she was. I never knew really how to be around her. So that's why I knew, like, as soon as I came in the room, if she said, "Take that look off your face," I knew I was in for a beating. I knew right away. Extremely horrible, bad way to grow up, and the psychological damage done is what really hurt. And the fourth family characteristic involves the broken parent who has not attained maturity and a feeling of self-worth because of a difficult past. And this type of parent takes care of the children when things are going smoothly, but falls apart when difficulties arise, and they are not able to hold on to a job or maintain a relationship. So that's the fourth type of family that they talk about, and that's kind of a precursor to set people up to abuse their children or to neglect their children or to, in whatever way, whether it's, physical abuse, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, or neglect or sexual abuse, right? It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And it is a choice. Abuse is a choice, just so everybody knows. People always like to think that abuse is, like people, you hear people say, "Oh, they lost control. They totally lost control. They lost it." And it's like, no, they didn't lose control. They're actually taking control. That's what abusers do. They will use whatever means that they need to control the situation. So, like, if they think that they have to take it to the top and beat somebody up, they will, just to maintain control. If they think that sexually abusing someone will do it, they will do that. It's whatever they think needs to be done to control the situation, to take control. And so it is a way, it's a means of control. It's not a person being out of control. And abuse is a choice. If they choose to do it, they want to do it. So many times you hear victims, I know because I'm a survivor, and I've run into so many people who have said, that, "Oh, they loved me, I know they didn't mean to hurt me." It's like, right, sure they didn't mean to hurt you. That's such a joke. And what it is it's just wrong misinformation. Abusers always want to hurt you. That's why they're doing what they're doing, right? Otherwise, they would never do it. See, nobody would beat and batter and sexually abuse somebody if they didn't want to, right? They are doing that because they clearly want to, and they're making a choice. And so there's none of this stuff like, "Oh, they didn't mean to" type of thing, right? That's garbage, right? So just so people know, check out the stuff on abuse. I cover all this stuff on my shows, and so if you're interested, I have tons and tons of information. That if you need links or you're just not sure where to find information, check with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children as well. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Like I said, I'm also the Chief Communications Officer, Media, and whatnot. So, if you need any information, please let us know, right? You can let me know here on my show, or you can let us know on Dreamcatchers for Abused Children.com, right, our website. if you need to get a hold of us in any way, you can always get a hold of me, and I'll get the questions off to the right people, and we can try to get, whatever information you need or any kind of help that we might be able to send your way, right? So be sure and get a hold of me if you need something. I have tons and tons of information because that's what I do. I research all the time. I was going to school here in Calgary for international community development. This has been a few years back now, but just prior to starting my blog talk shows, November 2009. And I was going to school the summer before that, but I had to stop going to school because I couldn't afford the courses anymore, which is unfortunate. They weren't all that expensive, but I was out of a job and couldn't afford to pay for them, so I had to stop going to school. And so I was studying international community development, which really encompassed mainly child rights, human rights, right? That's what it mostly was about. That's why I was very interested in the course. And so I study this stuff. This is what I do. This is what I will be doing for the rest of my life. And so I do have lots and lots of information on links and where I've seen good information, where I think, there was some helpful information, right? Because I've been doing the research and been doing blog talk shows for over a year now. And I was researching prior to that for about 4 years. Well, 3.5 years. So, it's I've got lots and lots of info if anybody needs any kind of information. They said here that some government data illustrate that children indeed live in households where domestic violence occurs, right? Well, that's obvious, right? I mean, I grew up in this, right? So I know. The U.S. Department of Justice reported in July 2000 that between 1993 and 1998, now these are pretty old stats, children younger than 12 lived in 43% of households known to have intimate partner violence. Now, there's some better stats. This is old, see? But there's some really good stats on some stuff I was just reading on, right, on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio if you want to go check that show out. It was tonight's show. And it was www.blogtalkradio.com. So if you're listening from somewhere else, like a player or something like that, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers, DreamCatchers, Dreamcatchers, right? You can catch that show, and there's this particular website that had some great stats on there, very interesting stats to do with mainly domestic violence, family violence, and child abuse, right? Endabuse.org. That's the name of the website. http:// endabuse, E-N-D, abuse, ABUSE.org. There's a lot better stats on there because it's it's newer information, right? But even this just tells you that back in like 1998, you know what I mean? I mean, children younger than 12 lived in 43% of households known to have intimate partner violence. That's almost half. But we know the situation. We know what's happening. Lots of people like to minimize abuse, and they like to minimize the fact that children are growing up in these types of homes, violent, abusive homes, because no one wants to think about it, because it's like they think, well, how can we stop this? We can't go a video camera in everybody's home, and the minute somebody becomes violent or abusive, the little sirens go off and it alerts the police and they show up at the door. I mean, talk about Big Brother, right, watching down your throat. We have to change the hearts and minds of the people. If you start looking around at some of the websites out here, there's some great information out there about people are talking about this, and this has been something people have been talking about for a long time, changing the hearts and the minds of people. And we really need to reach the younger people because we have to stop the cycle of violence, right? So the younger people that are just about ready to start having their own families, right, having their own children, these are going to be the next parents. So the people that will abuse their children are just coming right up here in a few years to be set up to abuse their children, right? Sadly enough, they will pass the cycle of abuse on if we don't reach them, right? And so that's why it's just so important that we do really promote education and, promote, awareness with young people, right? Because they will be the next parents, you know what I mean? I have a good friend in the chat room here. Hello, Trina. And, yeah, emotional abuse is just as bad as physical abuse. We have a comment here in the chat room. Oftentimes the scars take longer to heal. You bet. Absolutely. That's what hurts. I mean, physical abuse hurts. Certainly does. I know. I was abused physically. I'll tell you what really hurts is the hole in my heart. You know what I mean? The hole in my heart that my parents left. You know what I mean? And you can't get that back. And it takes a long time. A very long time to work through this stuff. And that's why, especially on my morning shows, I'm always kind of encouraging people to reach out and get some help, and not suffer in silence. Yeah, it's good to have you here. I'm so glad that you're here. Emotional abuse. Lots of people think that, that abuse is not damaging unless it's physical abuse, or that's just not true. because along with physical abuse will come emotional abuse, psychological abuse, right? Quite often verbal abuse, right? And child sexual abuse, or even adult sexual abuse. Along with that will be the psychological damage. There will be the emotional damage. The scars are so much harder to heal. The scars are so much deeper because they run through the very core of a person and the very psyche, their very being, right? So the body, even though sometimes the body doesn't heal from some of this abuse, right? You can kind of learn to live with that, but it's the pain in people's hearts that is what really destroys people. And that's the damage done from psychological emotional abuse, right? And it's absolutely horrible. And people just think, that abuse isn't abuse unless it's physical, and that is not true. It's just a verbal abuse, emotional abuse is very hard to prove because especially in court when you're trying to, working with an issue where a child's been emotionally or psychologically abused, it's hard to prove unless you document, and you have to have people witnessing, and you have to have all your ducks in a row if you're going to try to prove a case like that, because they're just like, well, where's the marks? Where's the bruises? Where's the scars? It's like, well, the scars are in the heart, man. You can't see some scars, and some scars are a lot worse than others, and those are the ones in the heart. And so yeah, it's pretty harsh, and I agree with you. I really do. So that's the thing. It's just it's very, very sad what happens to children here. But that endabuse.org, that's a great website for some more stats that are a little bit more current. They said here on this website, this is www.libraryindex.com, exposure to domestic violence and experiencing child maltreatment. They go on to talk about this here. They said various studies have found that child witnesses to domestic violence are more likely to exhibit aggression and behavior problems. These children experience internalizing behaviors, including depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, and low self-esteem. They have problems with schoolwork and attain lower scores in tests that gauge verbal, motor, and cognitive skills. And that's just because they do the studies and they sort of found that this is sort of the way it is. This wouldn't be for every child. I mean, I knew people growing up. I went to school with some kids growing up who were abused while they were going to school there, like myself, and they were actually brains. In particular, I won't mention any names here, right? A friend of mine who was being raped by her father was incest, right? Was a straight A student, and she had to have straight A's. She couldn't have anything less than straight A's, and it's because she was putting every ounce of herself into her schoolwork just to stay sane. Because of what was happening to her in her home. And see, I didn't know this until a couple of years later after we graduated. I actually talked to her, and she did tell me what was going on. And I kind of thought there was something going on with her because I was abused myself, and I knew that something wasn't right with her, but I didn't pry. And I knew that there was problems with her, that she was having problems, but didn't know exactly what, right? But I could tell because she was just suffering, you know what I mean? And when you're abused, you kind of notice other people, especially children, they spot each other. Most of my friends were abused, actually, and the people that I hung out with, most of them were abused as children, and we all kind of grew up together abused, right? Pretty sad, but it's the way it goes. They have problems with schoolwork and attain lower scores, so that's not necessarily true. I actually didn't do well in school until the last few years of high school, where I actually tried to put some effort into it. Just tried to do a little bit better job because I did want to graduate. So I didn't drop out of school or anything like that. But I was the only one that graduated out of 7 kids. So, I really wanted to graduate, and my scores weren't that great. But it was hard on a kid. It's so hard on children. They're in school and witnessing domestic violence. If their parents and their caregivers and are fighting, and fights are going on all night and all day, they're not going to have good sleeps. They're not going to be comfortable. They're going to be uptight, anxious, right, depressed, right, possibly using, substance abuse in there, which was my case. And suicidal tendencies can happen, low self-esteem, you name it, right? It's just absolutely horrible. So we'll have to finish this up on Friday. We have about a minute left, so I'll be back on Friday night for this part of the show, and then, of course, I'll be back on tomorrow morning with One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, same time, same place, 6 o'clock Calgary, Alberta time here. And then I'll be on tomorrow night, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio again, 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be talking about child sexual abuse on that show tomorrow night. I really want to address child sexual abuse tomorrow night. And so, yeah, if I can get any information for you, please let me know. Have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. And, make sure you reach out. If you're a victim and you're victimized and you're suffering in an abusive relationship, an abusive home, you make sure you get some help. Do whatever you can. If you have to call a crisis line, you just do. You call a crisis line. You do whatever you can, to get yourself some help, right? Because you certainly don't deserve that. You know what I mean? And no one does. And you deserve to have a good life, And so I know so many people out there, who are suffering in this right now. And I would just say try to save your life. Do whatever you can to save your life. And if you're suffering and you just think, I need somebody to talk to, I can't cope or whatever, you make sure you phone a crisis line. If you can't get a hold of a friend or you can't get a hold of your therapist or whatever, you phone that crisis line. I'm telling you right now, you do not ever give up. Not ever, right? I say this mainly on my morning shows, but I'm going to say it here tonight too. Don't ever give up. Just one day at a time. There's going to be some bad days, but there's some good days too, right? So hold on for the good days, okay? So we'll talk to you all real soon. Have a great night, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.